When architect David Morrison became New York's most celebrated building designer, developers trusted him to create the city's most iconic structures. But when his cocaine addiction and construction fraud schemes consumed him, he began designing deadly buildings for insurance money and murdering engineers who discovered his crimes, turning construction sites into lethal death traps. Before starting the video, don't forget to subscribe to the channel and turn on notifications. Now, let's get back to the video. The New York spring morning cast long shadows across Manhattan's construction district as architect David Morrison organized falsified building plans and insurance company payment records for what would become the most dangerous architectural project of his 26-year career as the Northeast's most acclaimed architect and construction design specialist. At 57 years old, David had established himself as New York City's premier building designer, controlling major construction projects and safety certifications that attracted real estate developers, insurance companies, and organized crime syndicates who valued his architectural authority and his reputation for coordinating the most ambitious construction developments affecting urban planning and building safety throughout the metropolitan skyline. David's architectural office occupied the penthouse suite of Morrison Design Associates' Manhattan headquarters, featuring construction planning systems, building code coordination facilities, and safety certification centers that allowed him to oversee the firm's most sensitive construction projects, while maintaining absolute control over building designs worth billions and construction contracts affecting structural integrity and safety standards throughout the regional development industry. The interior of David's office reflected his mastery of architectural design and his understanding of construction industry expectations for both creative excellence and absolute precision during the most critical building safety procedures affecting structural integrity, featuring walls displaying architectural achievements from prestigious institutions, photographs of completed skyscraper projects, and testimonials from grateful developers whose construction ventures had succeeded through his design expertise and strategic building coordination affecting urban development and architectural innovation. But beneath David's reputation for architectural excellence lay a dangerous combination of cocaine addiction, systematic construction fraud, and calculated murder that had transformed his design operations into criminal enterprises where threatening engineers and suspicious investigators met their fate through construction accidents and witness elimination during vulnerable building projects and safety procedures. "Good morning, Mr. Morrison," said senior engineer Sarah Chen, arriving for her weekly project meeting about ongoing construction developments and federal oversight that required David's authorization for structural designs and building safety affecting construction standards. Sarah had recently discovered irregular blueprint modifications and had begun questioning David's explanations about design protocols that seemed to bypass normal architectural oversight processes and federal building code requirements. "Good morning, Senior Engineer Chen," David replied with the architectural authority and design expertise that had made him legendary among New York construction professionals, who viewed him as both creative innovator and building safety specialist, capable of designing revolutionary structures through sophisticated architectural techniques and strategic construction coordination affecting urban skyline development and architectural excellence throughout the city. Sarah had become David's most dangerous subordinate, not because of her demanding engineering requirements or her federal coordination responsibilities, but because of her recent discovery of unauthorized structural modifications and her growing awareness of the fraud operation that David had been conducting while supposedly providing legitimate architectural services for construction projects and building safety programs. What Sarah didn't know was that David had been systematically designing defective buildings and murdering construction personnel for over 4 years, using his architect authority and access to building projects to coordinate insurance fraud while eliminating anyone who discovered his structural sabotage or threatened to expose his criminal exploitation of architectural resources for insurance coordination and construction fraud affecting building safety and structural integrity. David's transformation from respected architect to calculating killer had begun 6 years earlier, when his cocaine addiction had escalated from social use during high-pressure design presentations to daily dependency that consumed his substantial architectural income and forced him into relationships with insurance fraud organizations who offered enormous payments for deliberately defective building designs and structural failures affecting insurance claims and construction liability throughout the development industry. His addiction cost over $9,000 per day, while his access to New York City's major construction projects provided unprecedented opportunities for coordinating insurance fraud operations that generated millions through deliberately compromised buildings and planned structural failures, affecting construction safety and insurance claim processing throughout the metropolitan area. His criminal activities escalated when several engineers and building oversight personnel discovered evidence of unauthorized structural modifications and threatened to report their suspicions to architectural boards and federal law enforcement agencies, investigating construction fraud, targeting building safety and architectural integrity throughout New York construction projects. David murdered his first victim, a suspicious structural engineer who detected irregular foundation designs, by orchestrating a scaffolding accident using insurance fraud assets that appeared to be construction site incident rather than premeditated assassination designed to protect fraud operations. The success of his first murder convinced David that eliminating threatening construction personnel and suspicious oversight investigators was both necessary for protecting his fraud operation and achievable, given his complete architect authority and his ability to coordinate with insurance organizations who could stage construction accidents and eliminate witnesses while providing plausible cover stories involving building site hazards and construction dangers. Over the following 4 years, David murdered 14 additional individuals using various insurance fraud methods and construction coordination that took advantage of his architect authority, his access to criminal networks during vulnerable building projects, and his ability to stage deaths as construction accidents or site incidents that occurred during routine architectural activities with personnel who had access to sensitive information that could expose insurance fraud operations. His victims had been carefully selected based on their discovery of his criminal activities, their potential cooperation with architectural authorities, or their knowledge of building procedures that could expose his insurance coordination and systematic design of defective structures, affecting construction oversight and building safety compliance. His victims included Inspector Patricia Williams, a federal building safety specialist who had discovered evidence of systematic structural sabotage and whose construction site consultation had resulted in fatal crane accident staged by insurance assets during routine building inspection. Engineer David Foster, who had reported suspicious design activities and whose Morrison Associates meeting had ended in fatal equipment failure using machinery sabotaged through fraud networks, and Agent Jennifer Martinez, a federal construction fraud investigator who had been tracking building crimes and whose architectural firm inspection had resulted in fatal exposure to concentrated drugs disguised as construction material contamination, affecting federal oversight of architectural operations. The insurance fraud operation had become extraordinarily sophisticated, with David coordinating the systematic design of structurally defective buildings through carefully planned architectural flaws and construction weaknesses that would cause eventual building failures and insurance claims affecting construction safety and insurance liability throughout the development industry. Major skyscraper projects served as primary fraud operations, with David personally coordinating the incorporation of deliberate structural weaknesses and building code violations into architectural designs that would lead to catastrophic failures and massive insurance payouts affecting building safety and construction integrity throughout the metropolitan skyline. The most disturbing aspect of the operation was the systematic endangerment of building occupants and construction workers through deliberately defective architectural designs, with David coordinating structural flaws that created imminent collapse risks and safety hazards affecting thousands of people in compromised buildings throughout New York City. Multiple buildings had been constructed with deliberate structural defects as a direct result of David's insurance fraud operations, with office towers and residential complexes experiencing dangerous weaknesses and safety violations that threatened catastrophic failures, affecting building occupants and public safety throughout the metropolitan area. Mr. Morrison, I need to discuss serious concerns about construction fraud and reports of structural sabotage connected to your architectural operations," said FBI Special Agent Maria Rodriguez of the Bureau's White-Collar Crime Division, arriving at David's office carrying federal warrants to inspect his building procedures and interview him about suspicious architectural activities. Special Agent Rodriguez specialized in investigating construction crimes and had developed expertise in recognizing patterns of insurance fraud and building sabotage affecting architectural operations throughout construction firms. Special Agent Rodriguez's investigation represented an existential threat to David's criminal operation, as her federal construction fraud expertise and access to architectural crime databases could expose the systematic fraud operations and connect him to multiple suspicious deaths during construction activities and architectural meetings affecting federal oversight and building law enforcement cooperation. Special Agent Rodriguez, I think there may be some misunderstanding about complex architectural design and the unfortunate reality that construction personnel sometimes experience site hazards despite advanced safety protocols and federal coordination measures," David said, while discreetly activating a concealed emergency communication device that would summon corrupt construction employees who were part of his fraud network for emergency elimination of federal law enforcement threats. "Perhaps we could discuss these concerns in our construction coordination facility, where I can demonstrate the architectural procedures that might explain these tragic building site incidents." Construction projects involve dangerous structural operations that might appear suspicious to those unfamiliar with insurance claim coordination and building fraud affecting architectural operations. Special Agent Rodriguez agreed to examine David's architectural procedures, not realizing that the architect was leading her to a secure facility where previous murders had been committed and where David planned to coordinate her elimination using insurance fraud assets, while staging the scene as federal agent targeting that occurred during construction investigation, providing cover for her elimination while appearing to be criminal retaliation rather than deliberate murder by an architect protecting his fraud operations. But David's carefully planned murder of the federal agent was about to be prevented by the unexpected arrival of building oversight officers who had been investigating architectural irregularities and had identified connections to his systematic fraud activities affecting construction operations and building safety programs. Construction Inspector Michael Torres had been conducting comprehensive investigation into architectural corruption and insurance fraud that exploited architect authority to facilitate building sabotage and eliminate potential witnesses to construction crimes affecting architectural oversight and federal building law enforcement cooperation. Inspector Torres specialized in investigating construction crimes and had developed expertise in tracking architectural operations that compromised building safety while conducting systematic elimination of threats to fraud operations affecting construction integrity and architectural operational security. The building investigation had been initiated by reports from multiple construction oversight agencies and building safety organizations who noticed patterns of suspicious structural failures and construction personnel deaths, suggesting insurance fraud networks were infiltrating architectural firms to facilitate building sabotage while eliminating witnesses through sophisticated methods disguised as construction accidents. "Architect David Morrison, I'm Inspector Torres with Building Oversight," he announced as he entered the construction facility where David was coordinating Special Agent Rodriguez's elimination. "I have federal warrants for your investigation on charges of systematic construction fraud, architectural corruption, building sabotage, and multiple counts of first-degree murder related to your exploitation of architect authority for criminal operations affecting building safety and public welfare." David's reaction to the building oversight intervention was desperate attempts to maintain his architectural credibility as he realized that federal agents and construction investigators had been investigating his fraud activities and connected them to systematic construction personnel murders and insurance coordination affecting architectural operations. Special Agent Rodriguez looked stunned as she realized how close she had come to being murdered by the architect she was investigating for construction fraud. Her building investigation had not only exposed David's fraud and murder operation, but also prevented her own death at hands of a killer using architectural authority as cover for systematic elimination of federal agents and construction crime investigation threats. The comprehensive investigation that followed David's arrest revealed the full scope of his criminal enterprise and sophisticated methods he had developed to exploit architect authority for systematic construction fraud and murder. Forensic analysis of David's architectural operations revealed extensive evidence of his fraud activities, including sophisticated structural sabotage equipment for building defect coordination procedures, detailed records of insurance fraud worth hundreds of millions, and comprehensive files containing construction information that had been manipulated to facilitate building failures affecting architectural oversight and public safety protection. The investigation uncovered David's connections to insurance fraud organizations who had been coordinating architectural firm infiltration and construction sabotage operations while using his architect access to design defective buildings and eliminate witnesses through sophisticated methods disguised as construction accidents and building site incidents affecting construction personnel and federal investigators. Most disturbing was discovery of David's detailed knowledge of architectural systems and construction fraud coordination procedures, which he had used to develop increasingly sophisticated approaches for sabotaging buildings while eliminating construction personnel who discovered his fraud operations or threatened to expose his insurance coordination activities affecting building safety and public welfare. Architect David Morrison was ultimately convicted of 15 counts of first-degree murder, systematic construction fraud, architectural corruption, building sabotage, conspiracy with insurance organizations, and numerous other charges related to his exploitation of architect authority for criminal operations affecting building safety and public welfare. The conviction sent unprecedented shockwaves throughout Morrison Design Associates, prompting immediate reforms in architectural oversight, building monitoring, and architect addiction prevention measures designed to protect construction safety from exploitation by corrupted architectural officials involved in insurance fraud activities. Several other architects and construction officials were investigated for similar criminal activities, resulting in enhanced oversight of building operations and new requirements for structural verification, construction safety monitoring, and federal cooperation measures, making it difficult for fraud networks to exploit architect authority for systematic building sabotage operations. Special Agent Rodriguez and Inspector Torres received recognition for their collaborative investigation and became specialists in construction crime investigation, developing new techniques for identifying insurance fraud operations and protecting building safety from exploitation by corrupted architectural officials. Senior engineer Sarah Chen and other surviving construction personnel required extensive psychological counseling and career rehabilitation to overcome trauma of learning that their trusted architect had been systematically designing deadly buildings and murdering engineers while exploiting his authority for insurance fraud activities. The case prompted comprehensive changes in architectural regulation, including mandatory federal oversight and addiction screening for architects with building authority, enhanced monitoring of construction operations and structural procedures, real-time federal supervision of building projects, and new reporting procedures for suspicious architectural activities involving building safety violations. David's conviction led to increased cooperation between architectural oversight agencies and federal organizations investigating insurance fraud, with new protocols designed to identify construction systems that might be exploited for systematic criminal activities while eliminating witnesses to architectural corruption and building safety violations. 5 years after David's conviction and life imprisonment, New York City continued implementing safeguards designed to protect building safety from architects who might abuse their positions for criminal purposes affecting construction integrity and federal oversight. The architect who had promised to create innovative buildings and maintain construction excellence had instead used his architectural authority to commit systematic insurance fraud and murder, while exploiting construction resources for criminal coordination, threatening foundations of building safety and public welfare. Architect David Morrison's final blueprint had been permanently rejected by comprehensive investigation of construction and federal justice, where he would serve multiple life sentences without possibility of parole, proving that even architectural officials who attempted to exploit their building authority for criminal gain could be identified, investigated, and brought to justice when dedicated federal agencies worked together to protect public safety from predatory construction corruption. The architect's final blueprint had concluded with his permanent removal from architectural practice, serving as lasting reminder that those entrusted with building safety must never abuse that sacred responsibility, and that construction officials who would exploit public trust and architectural authority for criminal gain will ultimately face full consequences of their betrayal of construction integrity and building safety. Thank you very much for listening. Please let us know what you think of this story in the comments. Don't forget to like the video and subscribe to the channel. Turn on notifications so you don't miss any other videos.